This is going to be a difficult talk, so I will need you to help me out a bit here. I need to get into this issue of, we've all been discussing about coaching and leading and so forth. I'm going to try to talk to you about some companies that actually do it from the CEO's perspective all the way down. But first, who's been in this lean nonsense for more than 10 years? Oh, wow. And you're still coming to these conferences? Don't you have a job to do back home? 5 years. 2 years. That's pretty well spread out. Last week. Hi, over there. You can come to the front, you know. Who's changed their mind? Nobody? Oh, that's it. Today, after today, say no more lean. That sounds reasonable. All right, so you guys are pretty well into lean. Who has read Taishi Ono's workplace management book? Do we really need to have this conference? Or shall we just send them back and say, read the book? Well, guys, do the homework. Come on. So, Taishi Ono's first book is absolutely fascinating. And because it doesn't have any of the corporate crap we do now. It has a lot of the corporate crap they did then. And most of the book is actually about dealing with the corporate crap they did then, which is, funnily enough, not so different from what we do now. Different words, they didn't have PowerPoints, but the same problems. And what is fascinating about this book is that the first 20 pages of the first book Taishi Ono wrote about lean, TPS, whatever you want to call it, are about being wrong. Now, this has troubled me since my background is theory of knowledge. I have a doctorate in theory of sciences and theory of knowledge. And that has troubled me for oh Lord, because almost 20 years I've been in this lean gig. And this is, we need to understand very, very fundamentally. The part of lean that is scientific thinking is that you don't add up your knowledge by adding what is correct. You are truly wasting most of your time at a conference because people tell you all the things they're very proud of. Are they true? We don't know. Do they work? We don't know. They don't tell us. Have you ever met a mother that thinks her baby's ugly? Oh, you have? Do you have things to tell us, maybe? But everybody who does anything is very pleased with what they've done. Of course, they've just done it. Lean thinking actually works the way scientific knowledge works, which is by an accumulation of things you thought were correct, but turn out to be wrong. It's far more rigorous than that. This is not adding on best practices. This is subtracting from our minds our misconceptions, our errors. And most of the time, when we look at reality, we're absolutely convinced. You agree? Who sees the vertical as longer than the horizontal? Do you mean the rest of you have rewired your neuronal systems so you don't fall to this sort of petty illusion? Good for you. I need to meet your brain surgeon. Reality, we are absolutely convinced that we see it as the way it is. We don't have an option of looking at something and what you see is all there is. This is a fundamental psychological thing, and that's my background. Now, the whole thing that Taishi Ono hit upon is that often, and he says at least half the time, something else is going on. So when we only look at positive knowledge, we're actually usually at least half wrong. Where lean is interesting and lean is difficult, and it also explains a lot of why it's so hard to talk to the Toyota guys because we're on a different planet, is that lean knowledge is about what you know is wrong. And often when you subtract a wrong idea, you don't get rid of it altogether. You realize that it's more of it depends. You have a wrong idea, like I will say Taylorism is wrong. Actually, no, it's not wrong. It's given a 3% compound productivity since 1880. It has stopped us from having revolution of proletariat. The children of the workers have become school teachers. Children of the school teachers have become engineers. Children of the engineers have gone into marketing. I'm not sure where we're now. Social networks, probably. But it's not wrong. It just works in certain conditions and not others. So this is the difficulty of this talk. If you haven't come, the important thing of the conference is not where you think you've learned something positively correct you need to experiment with. Anybody that has not thought, oh, I was really wrong about this, has simply not learned. And that's why lean is so hard to do in practice. It's really a science of being wrong. Happens to me all the time. Now, here's my biggest mistake. Biggest misconception ever. As you'll see, it's only me, so I feel really bad about it. But when I first started studying this with a colleague of a gentleman who's here at the time, as the guys from Toyota, I was doing a PhD on mental models. And I talked to this to my dad, who was actually running the supplier, working for Toyota, and he discarded Toyota in 1975, so he was really keen to do it for real. So they said, okay, we'll send you an engineer, and he's going to sort out one cell in one of your plants. He had 50 plants. And so I talked to him about my research problem. I'm looking for a place where people have different opinions, different views of the same thing. Turns out, it's very rare. People will argue terribly, but they usually share the same perspective. And he said, well, first, get an honest job. Thanks, Dad. Then if you're really interested, there's these Toyota guys doing something really weird in the factory. And I went, factory? Me? Are you kidding? And for once in my life, I wasn't completely stupid. I went, and I just fell off my chair. What Steve Thomas at the time was doing with this production cell was just amazing. The resistance he was encountering from the French plant was equally amazing. It was lots of fun for me, not for them. I remember one afternoon with the methods engineer, one afternoon discussion that they wanted to go from batch size of 400 parts, of 600 parts. The Toyota guy wanted to go to 200 parts. One entire afternoon, the other guy says 400. Entire afternoon going 200, 400, 200, 400, 200, 400. 1 hour goes by. 200, 400, you think this is going to stop? No, the entire afternoon, they would not agree for the size of the batch. So they didn't have fun, but I did. So they do the workshop, and you have these incredible results. I know, you always have when you do a workshop. I mean, you have to be a complete idiot to screw up a workshop. It always works, always. If any of your lean guys screw up a workshop, just ask him to do something else, because it always works. You have these incredible results. I'll say, wow, easy. If all of you are a cell in the factory, if I get these results from this cell, if I got a guy who knows how to do this, well, that's pretty simple then. You just hit every other cell, right? And then, no problem, we've got 50 plants, and we just have to hit all the other 50 plants. Well, I don't feel too bad. Everybody thought that at the time. And we actually tried it for 10 years. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. Well, to put it back in context, back at the time, it worked at first because the plants were such holes that, of course, it works. But once you had the low-hanging fruit, then suddenly it draws into the sand and nothing happens. The company is not transformed. The plants are not transformed. Nothing happens. So you get you poor guys who are on a 2-year cycle, 3-year cycle of a new lean program. Those who've done it for 10 years, you've been through several cycles, I'm sure. We have a lean program, and it goes into the sand. So what do? Six Sigma program. Then it goes into the sand. So what do? Oh, you remember we used to do lean? Let's do lean again. Yeah. Because we had to accept that it doesn't work. So we had to think about why does it doesn't work? Well, first thing is that because savings are never translated at the budget level. So for 2 years, the lean program is bringing us this wonderful savings. And then at some point, the financial controller is saying, well, okay, but I should see the impact of all these millions on the bottom line, and I don't. So then you spend one more year explaining why not, and then you're dead. Second thing, spot results are never sustained. The moment you take all the engineers, everybody out of the line you were improving, what happens? It goes back exactly where it was. I remember one division manager who was very proud of what some consultants had done, and we were in the meeting room in the plant, and he opened his PC and showed me all the photos. And I got, let's go down to the shop. This was 3 weeks after the workshop. Okay, it was a German plant, so. But nothing. They had taken down absolutely everything. I wasn't particularly surprised because in the French plant, you know what they were doing? Steve would come and ask them to do something. Then he would leave, and what would they do? Put it back the way it was before. Take careful notes. The notes were very useful afterwards. When Toyota would come again, they would put it back again the way Toyota wanted. Because why should they bother doing all this stuff for a customer that is only 2% of your sales? And thirdly, if you go that way, you're going to make a few consultants very wealthy. I think we really missed our calling there, guys. I mean, we can think of some guys, yeah, who got it right at the time. But it's going to be an expensive way to support your transformation if you have 140 plants. Ooh, think of the consulting firepower you need. So what is really going on? What was really going on? How come my father did these transformations and without doing this? What was really going on? Well, it took us a long time to realize that we were just focusing on the wrong part of the system. What really was happening is that he, as a CEO, was completely involved. Not in the way you think. He was not supportive. Once a month, there was this gentleman from Toyota Central who had worked with Taishi Ono, who came there to beat him up. Him, the CEO. And how did he beat him up? He beat him up because they went together to a shop floor. And the other interesting thing is that he also beat up the Toyota consultant because we then learned that the reason the Toyota consultant was at the suppliers is to learn to make mistakes at the suppliers before they asked them to do the same job within Toyota. So I remember sessions where the Toyota consultant was taken by his boss, Japanese guy who would never say anything to the plant, taken by his boss and getting beaten up in the corner of the factory. So the whole learning system is actually not the one we saw. It is a complete different learning system. Because the real learning that happened was there, between the CEO and the cell. Now, every time, so the cell had to progress because every time the CEO came, they had to show him something different. But every time they showed him something different, he changed his mind. Every time the CEO changes his mind, the entire company changes. And you don't need a change program for that. You don't need anything for that. I'm sorry, you lean guys in the room? Oh, we don't even really need you. Actually, we do to get the change on the cell, but that's not where it happens. It happens every time the CEO changes his or her mind. That's the thing we finally figured out. So, John Shook defines lean as learning to learn. This is what they went through. But they had to learn, but most importantly, he had to learn. And as he learned, the entire organization shifted because, yeah, that's as you said, what everybody does all day long is look at what the CEO worries about or doesn't worry about. So when the CEO's focus changes, the entire organization changes. One day I said to my dad, don't you want to wear a beard? I said, why should I wear a beard? Never trust people who wear beards. They have something to hide. Sorry. But I'm sure that if he had started wearing a beard, half of the guys in the company would be wearing beards. You have beard companies and non-beard companies. Yeah? Everybody is looking at the CEO all the time, and they take their cues from him. So when he changes, everything changes. So how do we do this, learning to learn? How do we actually do this? Oh, it's a lovely sentence, but what does it mean? I mean, come on. Does anybody know what that means? I don't know. So a few lessons on learning to learn. First, you can't delegate learning. Every conference I do, somebody comes to me at the end, I'm sure it will happen today, saying, how do I convince my boss? I'm convinced. But how do I convince my... You can't convince your boss. The shareholder gave the company to him, not to you. End of story. You have to say what he does. You have to do what he says, not the other way around. You can't convince him. That's it. That's it. Deal with it. So most of the lean guys are in a difficult situation because their boss has delegated learning. Thank God he's not thinking of delegating other things that you can't delegate. But I'm sure it's crossed their mind. That's how they became bosses. They became bosses because they're good at delegation. So you give me a lean program. You get the results out of my crab factories. And you learn. No, I can see from your reactions, nobody's in that case. You don't recognize this at all. So the first thing we have to acknowledge, the first idea we have to take out of our minds, because don't kid yourself, everybody in this room believes in this. The first idea we have to lean out of our mind, you cannot delegate learning. It simply doesn't work. So what do we need to learn? The first thing for a CEO are the hard things, the things we never hear at lean conferences. How the hell do we make products that customers actually buy? Toyota didn't become number one because they had better factories. They became number one because they had cars people bought. And every car Toyota had to sell, they had a competitor who's not an idiot. It was a saturated market with very tough guys with real cars. So every car they came out with had to take an existing market. So the first thing a CEO has to learn is this. How do you make products customers will buy? And as you see, this is a learning cycle. This is something you need to learn every day. And working with CEOs myself, I can tell you that if we focus about production, don't worry about this, we simply don't get the results. So the first question for you guys is this. Is your lean program looking at the customer? Or is it just looking at doing 5S in the workshop? Sure, it's nice to have a clean plan. Okay, fine. So what? Healthcare? Healthcare people? Yeah? Are you worrying about the patients? Yeah, I know. Hospitals. We care so much about patients, we don't need to mention it anymore because it's in our blood. Yeah. Look at the lean actions and think about it from the patient point of view. Are you having a direct effect on the patient, or are you sorting out some organizational problem somewhere in the laundry department? Or are you making the staff happier? What is happening as a result of lean at the patient level? If you don't have that true north, your lean program is just going to be weird. You probably do a lot of great things. Hey, it's not a religion. I mean, this is good. But it's not going to bring you what you hope. Second thing, we need to learn about productivity. There's no way around this. This is the global world. Productivity is wealth. But the real kind of productivity. Now, this is really tricky, particularly in the UK. Not that you guys would know anything about cost cutting, right? But the kind of productivity we're looking about in the accounts is that on every budget line, what lean does is reduce the exceptional costs, or put it that way, it brings exceptional costs back into normal operations. You assume that your exceptional costs are the result of the way you just normally work. What most accountants or financiers do is they look at the line and they assume the line will be correct, and then, oh, we don't have results on the bottom line. Oh, well, you know, it snowed in the winter. Yeah. And we had people take holidays in the summer, so we had a lot of temps. So exceptional. It's not exceptional. It snows every winter. So here, the difficulty here with learning about productivity is understanding you might need a budget line that has a bit more slack in it. But what lean will give you is that you will fall on that budget line, which is a radical different thinking from financial. Who has had to do a budget recently? Yeah, so you've lived through it, you do a reasonable budget, you send it upstairs, and they slash everything by 2, and they give it back to you, and they say, sign it, and you say, okay. You don't have to worry about signing it, because something will happen to explain that you haven't made an unreasonable budget. So the second learning we have to do is to understand how we put the product through production so that we hit our budget lines. Now this, again, think about your lean programs. Are you learning this? Or are you just learning to make production pretty? It's not the same. You need to understand what the product does in order to produce right. Back to healthcare, it's an easy example. What are we doing to the treatment? How quickly, what is the lean effect on treatments on patients? Not just on the hospital. I'm starting to get the dreadful silence here. It's a bit early in the talk. Have I lost you all already? Are you with me? So first thing is your lean program looking at the customer and how the product delivers to customer? If not, just go home, do something else. They have great Six Sigma programs. Second thing is your lean program in production looking at the product? What is the impact on the product, on quality, on how the product works? And third learning loop for the CEO, which is really tough, is understanding what we do to our partners. Now, this is something in France we have quite a good experience with because our automotive industry that is doing really well, really flourishing. You know, Renault, Peugeot, and Audi, BMW, you know. Well, what they've done is they really have lean in their blood. They've put their foot on the throat of every supplier. That's something actually the Americans told them to do. It came from Opel. They put their throat on every supplier and they say, spit up everything you have. So the supplier spits out everything they have, including engineering jobs. The problem is that when you have a complex product in a hospital, one mildly complex operation, 18 people will touch the patient at some point. Do you see the complexity? When you have a mildly complex product, most of your innovation comes from your suppliers. When you want to do these open roofs, you know, the glass on the roof, some suppliers come up with this, not you. So if you actually squeeze the suppliers so tight that they don't have the engineering resources, they'll just give you unfinished innovation. So this is exactly what's happening to the French car industry. They have great ideas for their cars, except they don't work. Or put it that way, they do work, but not quite well enough. And this is all to do with learning the third loop, which is learning the interaction between our production system and our suppliers. So again, if you have lean programs, but the lean programs don't look at your suppliers, you'll be endlessly surprised. Toyota is not immune. Toyota is not immune. Have you heard they're doing recalls? Every kind, it's never a problem from their cars. Every time they have a recall, where does it come from? Supplier. The question is, how did they create the problem of the supplier? Well, put the foot on the throat. Like they're just a company like everybody else. How far, in order that you have to deal with China and all these things, how far do you push your supplier so that suddenly it starts sending you things you don't control? So it's clear. How do you put is your program targeted to deliver the learning we need to transform the company? That is a question today. 5S in the shop. I'm getting really irritated by this 5S stuff. Anybody tell me what 5S is for? What's the purpose of 5S? Purpose of 5S. Why do we do 5S? Organizing. So again, we organize what the people do. Somebody else? Clean factory. Efficient workplace. Transparency. God, you guys have a really bad case of Taylorism. That is not why we do 5S at all. I'll come back to it.
Make problems visible.
Who makes a problem visible?
5S. makes
What have you guys been teaching these people? I thought you were doing lean here for years. Come on, own up. Dave, own up. All right, back to the first, I'll come back to the 5S question. Back to the first loop. This is You have here in this room one of the best lean plant managers I know. So Steve, well done. This is his factory. And here we have a product that was redesigned according to everything you should do in a product development process with gate reviews and so forth, except that they came up with a crap product. And they were just losing sales. I mean, you can't, all the boxes were ticked. It was a Dutch guy who did it really well. He had the gate reviews. It was very rigorous. All the boxes are ticked. It had just no common sense in the product. It was a nightmare to build in the factory. They had all these problems. So here there's a change of pace, and they started doing real lean. And the first thing you see here, the first part is just quality. Just hard work on quality. Let's just stop taking value from customers and give back the value. Just let's have products that work. And this factory, they used to measure in falls per machine. They then moved to measure falls per 10 machines, now falls per 100 machines. Are we anywhere close to falls per 1,000 machines, Steve? You started falls per 1,000 machines. And what is astonishing, this is what it gives us. The production product loop gives us this in sales. On a saturated market dominated by very large competitors, it gives us this. As we do this, we're thinking about the first loop, which is what is the value of the machine. Now, these you've used everywhere. The time is the gasoline dispenser. I'm sorry to say, I've never convinced these guys that you're important. You're just the user. They sell to OEMs. They sell to the oil companies. Oil company you, oil company you. Mm-hmm. Okay. But at least we started to figure out what do we do for an oil company. And the marketing department also always said, it's only cost, it's only cost, it's only cost. So Steve still has to deliver his 3% cost reduction every year. But what in engineering, what we figured out is that a gasoline, one of these machines, is actually two things, measure and distribution. So we started getting closer to the real value of the machine. And they looked at their hydraulics department that they've put the foot on the throat, there was nobody left. So they rebuilt a hydraulics department. Lord knows it's hard. They started looking at the measurer. And the second part, here you have the 2008. I think everybody lived through this. But what is happening here is a radically improved value to the customer by a better measurer. A measurer that is better than anything else. It's a no-drift measurer that is better than anything else in the industry. And immediately, you see the sales growth continue. So this is an example for the first loop. Is as you fix quality problems in a hospital, as you fix every illness that somebody catches at the hospital that they didn't have before coming in, you start to think deeply about the value that your company provides. And it's very surprising because most companies haven't a clue. I do this everywhere, and we're really in the fog. I mean, we really don't know. And as you understand better the core of what the company provides, and this has a lot to do with taking away wrong ideas. Like the work we did with Steve, we had so many ideas about the machine, and said, let's take them away, test them, until we end up with something that is core to value. And what is astonishing is that markets react very quickly. This is real lean. This is top-line lean. This is not close a factory and go to India. This is about enriching the value to customers. This is what Dan and Jim saw, and it was very, very insightful because nothing could help them see it, that in their book, they said the first point is value. I always find it funny. Who's read Dan's book, Lean Thinking? Come on. Okay. Who's actually focused on the first chapter? You have? Everybody I see, they say value, yeah, very important, don't understand it. Oh, now flow, now I can do something. But here it is. This is what lean should bring to you, is the value. Lesson 2. There are no best practice processes. Sorry, you're all out of a job, or you can all stand up and walk out, but I'm sorry, there are no best practice processes. There's no two processes alike. There are no two factories alike. That's just not true. It's management wishful thinking, because if only we had best practices, then we can do cookie cutter. But what's behind this is actually we're all deeply conditioned by Taylorism. Deeply, deeply, deeply. And you can, myself included, you can never ignore how deeply we're conditioned by the fact that the smart people define the best process, and then you make the workers apply it, and this gives you performance. Which is not silly. It's better to have a clean plant than a dirty plant, clearly. But when you listen to your answers about 5S, it's all about this. You do 5S to people to define better, clearer, more visible, more efficient workplaces. We, the smart people, do this to them. This is, look back to the presentations you've had today. Look back to your programs. We, the smart people, do this to somebody else. This is profoundly Tayloristic. Taylor brought us two ideas, is that you have a bunch of guys shoveling coal, you invest in an engineer, staff, whatever, they look at it, they look at the guy who's shoveling coal faster, standardize the method, apply it to the 40% of the workers that work 60% more, and you're away, and it does work. So your engineer set rules, and your engineer set incentives, and you're away, and it does work. Not to the degree we need to survive into this world, because it doesn't compensate for the cost advantage of somebody who's in Vietnam or in China, who's also doing Taylorism. So the hard thing to learn here is Toyota's contribution. I'm not changing that. Again, when you take away a wrong idea, you have to understand, I'm not throwing it away, and the people who throw away Taylorism are just plain nuts. How can you? But I have to understand that once the smart people have defined the best process, that is a one-time event. They've delivered the baby, somebody else has to make it grow. And this is where we do standardized work and training in Kaizen, because smart workers refine it locally, in local conditions. This is what gives you performance. Now that's pretty radical and puts most of you out of a job. I can see you don't like that idea. You probably have a job still because you need to train them to do that. But this is radical. So 5S is not about a clearer plan. It is not about better organization. It is not about being more effective. It is not about better visibility. All these are nice to have benefits. It's about giving the operator the confidence to follow the standardized work. It's teaching the operator to put themselves in good condition, that if they have to look for a tool, that they have to walk away, they can't follow the standardized work. 5S only makes sense respective to standardized work. It doesn't make any other sense. If you have a dirty factory, well, clean the factory. That's okay. Don't call it 5S. When most people talk about 5S, they mention 3S. You know, sort and eliminate, sort, arrange, then clean. But fourth, standardize the routine so you do this within your job so that it stays like this. This is operator development. The one question Toyota broke, the way I saw this, I realized that every time I visited a Toyota plant, they had only one question for all this, I'm a lean expert, I don't have to listen to anybody else. This is why I became an expert. I don't have to learn anything else in my entire life. I can tell other people. So, of course, when I'm in a Toyota plant, you're the expert. You tell them what they do. And they go, huh? And they kept going, yeah, but in all you're saying, where's the mission of the operator? How does this touch the operator? There's nothing more important than that. And that is a true revolutionary thinking. We shift from organizing things for people to do the job to actually developing every single individual to understand their job and do it better. Radical shift of thinking. Actually very hard because our minds are full of Taylorism. So what happens is that people say, yeah, let's go home, and because there's all the Taylorism ideas that haven't been proven wrong, we haven't done the hard work, the first program we come up with is, again, Taylorism, with a different name to it. Do you see this? This is core to the learning we need to do. The CEO needs to go down to the level of every operator to figure out how every operator is refining the process they work on. That's the trick. It's not that hard, actually. If the CEO is open-minded, they actually will do it. So here's a construction company in France. And the CEO takes over here. Now, the previous guy had a record turnover and driven the profit into the red. To make things better, this is 2008, so the year after. Anybody experience something like this? Where your sales just go crash? You've had to, automotive, you had to go through this, yeah. So this, it's not a small crash, and we're talking about 30% crash. It's absolutely horrible. And to everybody's surprise, including me and the CEO, 2009, we make a profit. I mean, no kidding. I mean, this is cash in the till. This is make a profit. So you just couldn't believe it. Say, okay, better be lucky than good any day. So we're happy. The next year, we make more profit. So what's the deal here? Well, this guy doesn't have a lean program. The people in his company don't even know he's doing lean. He's tried it with one guy. He sent him with a training session. He came back, and he told the CEO everything he should be doing that is lean, and there's no blah, blah, blah. So forget it. But this CEO walks twice a week on his construction sites and gets his entire hierarchy to look down on how people actually do the job. That's all he does. Certainly, now he's doing a bit more complex things, but the first year, that's all he did. All he did. But he did it rigorously every year. It's not fun, it's just work. Work. Not very fun. No presentation, no system, nothing. Just paperboards where you get the middle management to write problem, cause, countermeasure, status. That's all. That's all you do. Look at the numbers. And as he did this, he changed his sales policy. He realized that leveling of his business was the most important thing for make a profit. So he changed the way they were taking deals. They wouldn't take just anything. They took it when they needed it. If not, they wouldn't agree to the rebate, so they lost the deal. Wow. He changed his supplier policy. No more fighting with suppliers. In construction, this was crazy. The way they deal with suppliers is just send them these horrible letters and go litigate. No more. No more. Change this. The supplier has to come to us with lower prices because he knows he can make the margin. He knows we guarantee the margin. Radical different kind of thinking. So now we get lower prices because the supplier has a margin guaranteed because we work with the supplier. He changed his entire recruitment policy. In the old days, you take any other business that comes along, you don't have the people, you just poach them from a neighbor and go ahead. Now we realize that what makes the reason we make money on some deals or not is just the quality of the people running it. So we have to grow them all in-house. Now, what is really interesting, and this really fits what Mike was saying yesterday about Toyota Kata, is that he never set out to change these things. There was no roadmap, there's no plan. Well, I had read lean thinking, so we had some vague ideas. But it's really literally through going through the work sites and talking to the people that his mind changed. The second interesting about this is that he never woke up one morning and saying, oh, I'm going to level the businesses I take. Never. This is something that happened gradually as he learned the error of his ways and as he saw the money he was spending in overcost when he didn't do that. So this is the important point of my talk, is the CEO, from watching how the individual workers deal with whatever conditions he's giving them, is learning to rethink his entire business, which is one of the reasons it's so hard for us to study Toyota. Because they tend to be pretty good at this, except that it's just like what we do in other companies, it's just messy, and there's never a clear-cut moment where you get change from thought A to thought B. This is this constantly messy, evolving things that enables you to deal with massive crisis and come back and still be top of the world. Yeah, you with me? So this guy, in order to do this, what has he got to learn himself? And this is really tricky. Because now instead of the CEO having to delegate other people to learn or to tell other people to learn, suddenly finds himself in a situation where he's got to learn himself. Whoa. Most of these guys didn't become CEOs by learning, eh? They became CEOs by watching all the other guys with ideas get shot and shot and shot. That's how they get there. So the first thing is knowledge of work, and you have to get interested in individual work. You don't have to understand it all. If God forbid, no, if you all had done something really nasty in a previous life and you have a terrible karma and you work for me, think about it. But if this is my company, I don't have to understand everybody's job. I have to be interested in every one of your jobs. That's all it takes. But I need to go and be interested in the job. I need to have a clear vision of what is your responsibility and role so that you don't start spreading yourself too thin. I need to be good at instructing. I need to be good at making you do Kaizen. And I need to be good at helping you be better, work better with your colleagues. Now that's interesting because it's kind of fractal because we see it at the CEO level, but funnily enough, that's exactly the skills we need at supervisor level as well. And that solves our middle management problem because now we know what we need the middle management to do. Just these 5 skills. The other good thing about this is these are teachable skills. These are not metaphysical leadership skills. These are actually teachable skills. It starts with this. You look at every employee when they do their work and you ask yourself, is the objective clear for these guys? Not just the objective for their immediate customer, but the objective for the whole thing. You know the story of the guy hitting a rock? What are you doing? Are you just cutting a rock? Are you building a wall? Or are you building a cathedral? It makes a world of difference in how you cut the rock. So this is the first thing. You go to the Gemba and you ask to say, you, sir, in your work, if I'm standing next to you, I look up, this is Tracy Richardson. She's got a great blog called Toyota Gal. It's her expression. What is the line of sight from here? How, if I sit next to you, do I understand what you have to do? And yes, this is a CEO job. And most of the time, the guy this is cutting a rock, What does he care? So this is the first thing. Do we understand how the line of sight objective for every person are clear? Then the job elements. Are the job elements clear? Again, this is not rocket science, but you have to sit down next to them and say, well, what are the job elements? Do we have standards? Are they tolerances? Are they reminders? Are they things we need to know? And is there an obvious waste in the way they work? Do they have ideas? And you start this conversation. And then you have going to teach your entire management line to have these conversations every day. And again, we've not touched the organization. We don't have a program. We just do this every day. This is a tricky one. The way we want our processes to work is that we want people to be much better at talking to each other upstream and downstream. That's what makes the process work, not the formal process, the actual real process with real people. In order to do this, the first thing we need to do is to be clear on what the roles are. So here's a Toyota trick. I haven't got it on the slide, but for everybody, you look at them and think, what is their minimum job role? Not maximum job role. I mean, if you list other things any employee should be good at, they have to be a Superman. Well, they don't have to wear their knickers over their tights, but they have to be so incredibly good that you'll never get there. So the question here is, what is the minimum job role? What is the minimum thing this guy has to do to perform? And in Toyota, when you look at the minimum job role, it's kind of strange because the first thing is, of course, respect safety procedures. Secondly, do the work, following the standard. Thirdly, call out when you have a problem. That's part of the minimum job role. Now, this is incredibly complex, and it shows you that if you want a lean organization, you have to build it from the person up. Because call out to whom? And suddenly you see the complete disconnect of the organization is there's nobody to call out to. in healthcare, if a nurse has a problem, what does she do? Typical nurse problem. Typical nurse problem. Yeah, she knows that every day she has so many stuff to do to plug into the people, plug into the pocket. I don't have my English is not that good on nursing, but she's got to put stuff in. How do you call them? These pockets of fluid. They plug stuff into the room. So every day she does. So she prepares it in advance because nobody's asked her this, but she's committed. She wants to do her job well, and she knows there's a rush. So she's prepared it in advance. Okay, fine. And then she comes to a patient, and she actually sees that she actually does the job. She sees that he's a diabetic. So what she's prepared doesn't work in this case. So what does she do? She just puts it aside, keeps on working, and then forgets about it. One case in 100, what happens? Well, she doesn't see it, she plugs it in, or she just forgotten it's in the pocket, something else happens. And then you kill somebody. All of you don't do lean in healthcare, it's terrible. When my wife was delivering our first son, they told me, are you sure you want to be there? Are you sure dads don't like this. They usually faint. I'll say, okay, it's the first son, I'll be there. And then the anesthetist, how do you say the anesthetist? The anesthetist comes here, and she says, okay, give her 2,000. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. And the nurse says, you mean 200? And I say, oh yeah, 200, I always get it wrong. Sir, you're all pale, we told you. When this happens, it's a normal accident. Nobody cares about this. We haven't built up a Toyota-like environment in which the nurse can call out incident, call out near miss, and somebody responds to this, and we do something about it. So we have to start from the nurse in front of the patient. Minimum job role. So here again, if you have a lean program, how does your lean program actually clarify the minimum job role? Ask yourselves. Because to the people on the ground, it makes a hell of difference. Renting cars. I go rent a car. There's nobody there. I go rent a car, and I've already prepaid it and so forth. The lady is in training. Nothing is ready. I've prepaid it. All I want is keys and go. I'm in a hurry. I'm an important man. I have factory to yell at. And this is the time that the supervisor chooses to train her. So no, you don't understand. No. Takes forever. After 10 minutes of this, I'm ready. Really, it says, difficult customer, don't screw with Mr. Zero. So I start yelling. And what does the supervisor do? He yells back, can't you see I have to train this person? Well, actually, yes, I can see it. And do I care? No. I just want to get out of here. These situations happen every day in your companies, and this is a lack of clarity on the minimum job role. Of course, the supervisor has to train the lady. Of course. But what is the minimum job role as a car rental agency? Strangely enough, getting you into a car. But they forget it because of everything else that's been asked for them. You wouldn't do stuff like this. No, your companies don't do stuff like this, no? Because you're lean guys, you're on it. You're on the case. Thank you. Now, this is another very, very important thing and a misunderstanding about standardized work. When you listen to people talk, they're talking about standardized work because finally we can have quality. If only these idiots on the shop floor would follow the standards. The nurse that was preparing ahead, there was no standard that says she should. If she had followed the standards, she wouldn't have the problem with the diabetic patient. We have a patient plan, don't we? Why don't people follow the standards? Well, because people are humans. How can you stop a thinking monkey to experiment? That's part of what we are. Or created by the almighty creator that created us curious. But that is who we are. People will experiment with their role. Of course they do. They're people. Making them follow the standard doesn't make sense. They will always find a way to go around it. This is not why we have standardized work. We have standardized work to make them feel comfortable about their judgment about good or bad job. It's radically different. Again, it's about the person. We need to understand this. The standardized work we have is not something they have to follow. It's something they have to play with, understand. And if the guy is too tall to actually apply the standards because when he puts the windshield on, because he's tall, if he follows the standard that says that you have to put your knee here, it doesn't fit. We will make a special standard for him. That's okay. That's okay. We need to understand the difficulty. We need to understand the reality of the process. Because the problem is, how do we develop people's confidence in their good, bad judgment all the time? This is what gives us excellence. This is what gives us great processes. Not that they apply to the letter. How can they? Life changes, it's different everywhere, it's a big mess, so forth. Of course they're creative. Thankfully they're creative, but we need to explain this. And the way to do this is within a relationship. You can't force anybody to apply a standard. You develop a relationship where you relate with them, you repeat it until they understand what exactly is here. So it's explanation, demonstration, participation. The standard is a living tool to get them to understand their judgment about their work. Same thing with Kaizen and problem solving. The real purpose of Kaizen and problem solving is to get them to understand their work. Of course, if you get all these benefits, fine. I'm not going to go into the steps. You're all experienced enough to know them. But it's the point of the steps. The point is we go through them. And when we've done, you know what? We go through them again. What's the point of Kaizen? Come on, somebody. What's the point of Kaizen? Nobody reads the John Shook column? Do your homework. What's the point of Kaizen? Eliminate waste?
Close the gaps.
Close the gaps? Make more improvements? Change the way you think. Do the next Kaizen. The point of Kaizen is do the next Kaizen. Because it's through doing the Kaizens that you get to the real thing you're trying to get to, is that you change the way you think. And remember, we need people on the ground that change the way they think to teach the CEO new things. Remember, there's this relationship. And probably one of the most underestimated. If you ask me what works in a company, how do we get these results, which is double-digit growth? I haven't got the graphs here, but these incredible results as I showed you. The main factor for me is teamwork. It's not team spirit as you have in the UK. You have all these great, I should have a pop clip with all these great things about this. Not at all. It's the individual skill of knowing how to work with others across functions. Teamwork is a teachable skill. It's not team spirit. It's not shut up and be part of the gang. That's not it at all. It's learning to solve problems with other people, particularly people who are not in your group or not in function. It's a teachable skill. But this is probably one of the most important things in terms of getting results. So explain what you're trying to do and listen to their opinions. Well, you have to. I'm French, so I have a God-given right to be rude to anybody I want to. And I don't have to listen to anybody's opinion but my own, so I'm okay. Be sensitive to their difficulties. This is essential. This is the whole point of standardized work, is not to force them to follow the method. It's to understand what is the difficulty they're having in following the method. It's a completely different world. So define shared success and encourage initiative. The CEO has to do this every day. The way we define lean is Kaizen plus respect. So many people have talked about Kaizen. I'll go into the notion of respect. Had a great presentation. Dan was there at the Lean IT Summit in Paris. We had this chap from Toyota who came up and said, respect for us in Toyota has a very specific sense. It means respect in the development of the person's autonomy. So you can yell at somebody with respect, as long as your intention is to develop their autonomy. And he says sometimes they go home at night and they say to their wife, "Ooh, my boss has shown me a little too much respect today." But respect is this fundamental commitment. It's not about being polite. It's this fundamental commitment to people's development. Fundamental commitment. And the second part of respect is teamwork, which is to teach every employee to work with their upstream and downstream. This is how you get great processes, because people understand what they're doing with the upstream and downstream, not because the process has been set right. Lesson 3, respect that people are human. Companies make products for humans, with humans, by humans. And that means that each person is an individual. We try to put them in rules and roles all the time, but they're a person. They don't fit. And which means is that, first is that customers don't fit. Customers, and this is we have two psychological systems running in our mind, are constantly having their immediate experience. Are you happy to be here? You were happier this morning, but are you happy to be here? This is one thing. And the second thing is, how does this relate to your decision to come here? So we're constantly working on two things: how we feel right now, and our life journey, how we evaluate our life journey. It's complex. We need to understand this. Employees are the same thing. They want jobs, safety and security, but they need a challenge. They want autonomy and initiative, and then they always ask you for clear rules and instructions. They want to be self-directed, and oh God, do they need praise and constant feedback. It's okay. We need to accept this. We need fundamentally to accept that every person is an individual, and they have annoying quirks as well as creative potential. We need to treat each person, in order to properly coach, we need to treat each person as an individual they are, and that it's perfectly okay to both be quirky and have creative potential. So you need to go back to your programs and to your actions and ask yourselves, in the job I'm doing today, am I leaving room for that? Am I leaving room for people, individuals? Oddly enough, when we do this in a company, this is far more convergent than by enforcing strict rules and standards. Do you know why? Because one thing we know about people is they're lazy. So if you force a standard on them, what is the first thing they're going to invent? Is being very creative, but going around it. If you ask them, hey, please be creative about how to do this job with this performance, what will they do? They'll go and copy the guy who achieves it. So it's actually far more convergent. You actually get to far more standardized processes, accepting that they're individuals, than trying to treat them like machines. In this company, this is the cash ratio, no lean program. These results are mostly obtained by teamwork. Suddenly, the company's directors, rather than have each their own objectives, decided that their name of the game for them was cash, and they started working on the entire supply chain together. And the results are stunning. They're incredible. They had the cash. The funny part is, one of the reasons they were cash negative is that they had invested in a new warehouse to bring parts from China, that because of the lean program, they could reimburse the corporate the money they've borrowed, and they no longer needed the warehouse, so it was a bit of an embarrassing moment. But here, these results are mainly driven by teamwork. It's the addition of everybody's initiative that gives us the result, not at all the imposing of lean principles. The lean principles are the way we work with people, but it's people. One of the things that happened, they brought parts from China. We were doing whip pull system in the factory, and there was the poor lady there from procurement, and she really wondered what the hell she was doing there. With all these techniques with Kanban cards and all this crap, and she was going like, I have my job back home, why am I here? And then one day she realized that she had a container arrive from China every week. But on each container, 1 month it was part A, then the next week was part B, so part C, so part A would only arrive once a month. And she thought, why don't I just ask the Chinese to put A, B, C in every container? Boom, 20 million euros cash. 20 million? So I never looked at this. Nobody in the company ever looked at this. She came up with it, and she didn't come up with it as an aha moment. It sort of kind of happened. But it kind of happened because she was part of this teamwork effort, and because of the work we were doing, something that had nothing to do, which was the lean in the factory in terms of the just-in-time. So here's a lean deal. And this is the one question to ask yourselves in every activity that you have on the shop floor. Are you increasing mutual trust, or are you destructive of mutual trust? 5S programs. Who's gone through one 5S program? 2 5S programs? Who has experienced more than 5 5S programs? Nobody yet? You'll get there if you stay in this game long enough. Look at a 5S program. Is a 5S program in your company conducive to more trust between people and with management? Or is it destructive of trust? Is the 5S program built to build the confidence of employees in the company? Or is it a way to catch them out if they're not cleaning their shop floor? When I start to work with an industrial site, the first thing we do is we do ergonomics short Kaizen, half a day, 1 shift. The point is not just operators and one guy but just operators, no engineers. The real point of the program is to have the plant manager come and pay for some small thing. The point of the program is trust. Trust. And then we can build. If we don't have trust, we have nothing. The problem with trust is that it takes 10 years to grow a tree, and it takes a few seconds to cut it down. So here's these are the important glasses. You need to go back to all your lean activities and ask yourselves, in this lean activity, are we building trust or destroying trust? At the CEO level, what we end up now is there's the execution system, and there's a learning system. And at CEO level, it's quite easy because we have to have CEOs focus on learning most of the time. There are a few big decisions to make, but the CEOs I work with, the decisions are delegated. They're big decisions always. Most of the time, the CEO is on the Gemba to make sure the learning system is happening on all these topics we discussed. At operator is simple because okay, they're part of a Kaizen activity once a year, and we do dojos, so they get trained regularly once a month or something, but it's still pretty small compared to the execution they have to do. Where it gets really difficult is for middle management, because they have both to do the projects, get the results, and put in place the learning system, and we understand their difficulty. We try to work with them, but we understand it's a difficult place to be in. We are asked to do 2 things. But if there is one learning that I have from working with CEOs, is this. How do you extract the CEO from running the business to teaching the business to run itself? And the lean techniques, the point of the lean techniques are this. And yes, Toyota senior executives in the old days, I don't know what they're doing now, but yes, I have seen a VP spend all his mornings going to the shop floor and discussing problem solving with shop floor guys. Yes, they do this. Actually, they don't think it's something on top of their jobs. They actually think it's a job. Now, the surprising thing is that this delivers massively more performance than everything we do to execute. I haven't talked much about coaching, because a real difficulty about coaching is actually what we coach. Coaching in itself is not that hard. You don't even have to do it well. What you have to is to be very clear on what you're trying to coach, and this is where we always fall over. We're so confident in what we do, but we have to remember Taishi Ono's advice. Half the time we're wrong. So you can pick half of my slides. Half of them are pure crap. Unfortunately, I don't know which, and you don't either. That's what makes it fun. So the coaching trick is, first, competence goals. You have to look at the person and say, okay, have I agreed with this person which is the competence they need to improve to succeed? If I don't have that, I can force them all that I want. They just won't listen. And this is actually very difficult because we seldom ever go there. This is a difficult conversation. Hence the yelling. This is not a conversation that is nice to have. So you can either draw it out in a long, not nice conversation being polite, or you can yell at people. It's okay to yell at people. Not do it too much. But this initial conversation tends to be horrible. Because people are grown-ups, they know what they're doing. You need to have the conversation. This conversation, when I say like this, set competence goals, it sounds simple enough. What does it mean in practice? It means going to you, sir. I don't think you're good enough. That's what the conversation is about. How is he going to react? Well, oh, thank you for pointing it out to me. What can I do to radically change myself and improve? What do you think is going to happen? Oh, you're getting all the defensive mechanism. And again, we have to respect people are human. It's okay. Just wait through it. Go back. But there is definitely a difficult moment in there that we have to have the competence and conversation. There's no way else. So with fundamentally motivated people, that's easy. I was having a conversation yesterday with René with one of the problems we have with the lean movements in terms of how we deal with the sensei and deep learning. And getting in the conversation is hard because nobody wants to go there. Once you've gone through it, then everything becomes easy. The second thing is, are you clear on the ideal you want? Do you actually know what you're going to coach them? That's tricky. But it's to clarify with them the ideal. And then, and this is the point of my entire talk, you need, as a coach, to figure out the person's individual difficulty with what you're asking them to do. This is where it's rich. This is where it's human. This is where it becomes full. It's not apply the process and get it done. It's to figure out, one, we assume that they are trying, but they're stumbling on something which is actually linked to them or their environment. And we need to figure it out. And this is where we bring the value in the process. And then if you're a good coach, you figure out what's their difficulty, you find the right exercise for them to practice. This is like sports. If the movement is wrong, well, you figure out an exercise. And this is where this joins Mike's kata. It's a formal exercise. We don't intend from the exercise, it's going to be in the shop floor, it's going to be for real, but we don't intend to have results from this. We don't particularly care. And what we want to do is that they repeat the exercise until they finally get to grips with their difficulty we're trying to get them to face. Do you see there's a remoteness here? This is where you can do it at CEO level and it's very hard at middle management level. The remoteness is that the CEO doesn't want you to fix the problem immediately. If it's a burn the company problem, he's on it. Most of his problems is one of his manager's problem. He doesn't care, or she doesn't care. So she can set exercises for them to learn and be there to discuss conclusions. Tomorrow, go to the Gemba. Ask yourselves, are we putting the customer first? Actually, in many cases, ask yourselves, what the hell does it mean to put the customer first? Ask yourself, are these people that are working here putting customer first? Do they understand what customer first means in their job? Ask why. Show respect. Okay, you don't have to show respect in my way, guys. It's a free world. By all means, please be polite and nice to people if you know how to do it. Show respect, which means actually care about them as individuals that you want to develop. And this will be the conclusion of my talk. It was very hard these years ago because I was like everybody else. Remember the first slide. I was convinced that lean was easy. You take the lean tools and you apply them to every processes. And you get the result. None of you guys would do that, right? Nobody's asked you to come up with a roadmap with all the processes in the company, and then we're going to hit it. One thing I've learned since is that when you start doing lean in the office, you've just completely lost your way. That's a really bad sign. Worry about your engineering and worry about your production. Everything else is okay. That is the one learning CEOs learn from doing lean for real. they usually think that to be a good CEO, they have to sort out their office process, their HI process, the ISO 9402, all these things, yeah? And the big work we say, worry about your customers and your products. Worry about your customers and your products. If you get that right, you don't have to get the rest wrong. It doesn't matter. It's indifferent. Just let people do whatever they do professionally. It's okay. You don't have to optimize the company. You have to optimize what you do for your customers and how you produce it and how you get the cash back. So show respect. Show respect is get fundamentally interested in the development of each person in front of you. And at the beginning it says, we thought you have all the list of processes, we're going to hit them with the lean tools. And the sensei, the old guys from the old times, they always said, no, it's about developing the Kaizen spirit in each person. And it took me 10 years to understand, which is, just shows you how slow I am. But I really, really think this is what it is about. Our lean transformation is not about applying our lean tools to every process. It's about using the lean tools and using them very rigorously, but with one end that is clear, is how do you develop and encourage the Kaizen spirit in every person in the company. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we've got a few minutes. Sure. So we've had the Frenchman in the lion's den. Okay, so any questions for Michael?
Easy questions only. Or easy questions first.
Or are you all scared to ask him anything?
Come on, give me a fight. Wake up.
Not a single question. Honestly, come on.
No, that's a job well done. Come on, questions. René?
Hey, René?
So how do you get a CEO to do this with you?
Oh, you don't?
So they invite you?
Well, by the time they've come to me, believe me, they've tried everything else. But they really want to get those results. You know, it's the old Woody Allen story, you know, about you go to the doctor and say, doctor, my brother thinks he's a chicken. Say, well, why don't you turn him in, you know, and say, well, I would, but I need the eggs. What happens is that a few CEOs really need the results. And they usually have gone through the big consultant way and this way and this way. And as they progress for their lean journey, they come to accept that we don't know of one lean transformation that happens without a sensei. Since they can't find a sensei around, they're stuck with me. But I've never tried to convince anybody of doing this. This is actually, the real problem we have is not so much this, but how do we know we're right? How do we develop people who can do this? And that's a tricky one. Yep.
Okay, one down the front.
Yep, so just a question, thank you very much, nice talk. As you get clearer about what makes a difference in transforming a company to lean, you know, and you've laid it out there, are you seeing that this is increasing the success rate for companies in transformation? Because I think, you know, we've known about and we've seen Toyota for 40 years now. Yet I think, you know, you'd be disappointed in the success rate. So is this clarity and the speech talks from yesterday and today
Nope.
about, is it also hitting the success rate of transformation?
The lean movement has.
Do you want to just repeat the question, Michael?
Yeah, as we were clear about what makes a lean transformation, do we get a bigger success rate at lean transformation? We don't. The lean movement, you're still in this room because the lean movement have been the same for 20 years, which is a lot of people try, most fail, but those who succeed incredibly. So we have two problems in this respect. Our first problem is that we don't have enough senseis that can talk at CEO level. So one thing, it's not a talk, it's a talk I did. There's a webinar on this if you're interested on the LEI site. you need to talk to CEOs about getting interested in individual people, but the way you talk to them is through talking about top line, cost, cash, capex, ROI. So you need to talk CEO language. So we need to, as advisors, to be as comfortable, or not as comfortable, but at least to handle the finance as well as the detail of understanding 1 second waste on the shop floor. The part of our difficulty is that developing people who understand these two things, it's tough. The other part of the problem is that, well, you know the story of the guy who falls off the cliff and grabs a bush? Help! Help! Believe in me and let go of the branch. Is there somebody else up there? To most of these guys, I mean, you're lean guys, so you hear what I'm saying here. But to most CEOs out there, because we've not bridged the gap of language, this is just magic dust. This doesn't make any sense. So the CEOs who actually will do the lean transformation have had their own journey. So we have a population of companies shrinking, because many of them are going to China. In this population, we have CEOs doing or not doing their journey, and we have a bottleneck on senseis. It's a miracle that we actually get any transformations done. But we do. So to answer your question, I don't see an increase of transformations. Okay, to answer your question fully, we should be learning. Actually, we are. But remember that there's a churn problem. As we learn, we lose the hard-ass Japanese senseis who taught us all this. Because they're older or because they're brought back in because they have their problems. So in fact, it's taking us all this year to learn what these guys were doing right at the start with companies that were in Dan's book, like Lantec or Wiremold. So just hear me. So as we lose a population, and we're learning at the same time. Unfortunately, we're kind of the global level hasn't changed much.
Any others? Yeah, one right at the back.
Thanks. Hi. Earlier on, you said that savings won't translate at a budget level. Could you sort of tease it out a little bit more and explain why?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
Savings won't translate earlier on in the talk. You said
they never do.
Savings don't translate at a budget level. Could you explain a little bit more?
They never do. They're not real. They're just a number. You go and do a workshop, and you have a number of operational parameters that are better, that you calculate as a saving, that you add up. If you return to the workshop 2 days later, the rubber band has worked, and they're just back to what they will always do. So the savings number don't translate because they're not real savings. In order to have real savings, you have to fundamentally change the way the cell has worked. And this did happen in the first Toyota projects. I remember my dad being there visiting and discussing with the guys around the cell. And then at some point, he realized that they had changed production on the cell. The ladies on the cell had changed production on their own. And they'd never noticed a change. It just happened like this. So no changer, no tool, no big drama, no stop. They had changed production like this on the cell. Now, this is a radical change. But until you get this, you don't see the savings. Secondly, the savings are not necessarily where you think. That very first experiment at Toyota, GM came to see my dad's company and say, look, we're going to take times, and then we're going to help you. So they took times and say, you have 30% productivity in the plant. Give us 15 now, and we'll show you how to get the other 15. Toyota came and took times and said, you have 30% productivity potential, and actually we'll work for 2 years and never ask you a dime. Where was the gain for Toyota? What was in it? Well, it turned out that when they came up with a new generation of the product was 27% cost less. And they split the gain evenly with the company. So the actual saving, the real hard saving for the transformation was not in the actual workshop, was in the next product. And something you learn with experience is that the real savings are in the next cycle of investment. because you do the next cell that you do is going to be radically different from the one you did. The next factory you build is going to be radically different. And then you start really leaning your company and going onto the cash machine, because if every cycle you've learned from the previous one, or doing Kaizen, you've learned from the stupid mistakes you made in engineering on the previous one that you have to compensate for, that you no longer have to compensate. So again, savings just simply don't, it's a paper thing. It doesn't make real sense. What drives companies is cash, and until you see the cash improvement, you've got nothing. Does that answer the question?
Okay. Go on, Dan. Do you want to say?
I would say go and watch Michael's webinar on the LEI site on building a business case for the. That's where you also explain.
More in detail, yes.
Okay, so one last question.
No reactions. I just said we don't need any lean program and nobody reacts?
Okay.
You all agree? Oh, okay.
They're going to do it anyhow.
I'm not going to react to what you just said. One of the items on one of your slides, you have a list of 5 things that a CEO should be doing. And one of the items was be good at instructing.
Okay.
I'm surprised that you had instructing
Can you put the slides back up?
rather than be good at questioning. Could you perhaps elaborate?
Oh, this is so sweet. I'm talking to CEOs. Or actually, or even if I'm talking about to old-fashioned supervisors. Come on, leading by coaching. No, you instruct. There are different ways of instructing, but like Steve said earlier this morning, listen to when he goes to these conferences, he's sitting there and saying, "Oh, you should come to my world." The reality of the factory is that things happen all the time. You have labor variations, you have customer problems, and so forth. And the trick is you need to absolutely know what you want them to learn. Now, when they don't know anything, you just tell them. When they've tried, you're ready to talk to them. When they're mature, you just ask the question. It completely depends on them. But imagine the panic a CEO can create if he just goes and asks questions that he doesn't have the answer to. So the questioning thing is just it's a training mechanism to get them to talk. But of course you know the generic answer you want. Does that make sense? I mean, we are really talking about instructing people. What does happen is that occasionally, actually, quite frankly, we get surprised by their answers and we learn as well. That really does happen, particularly when they've implemented something. The CEO of the construction company, they've had 2 patents. How do you say this? Patents?
Patents, yeah.
Patents out of this work. And what happened is that one guy solves a problem and all he sees is the local solution. Then the CEO asks another guy to solve the same thing and to do the same thing to instruct. And when he sees 10 people do it badly, suddenly he realizes he's really onto something, and then he asks somebody to do it well. Do you see what I mean? It's never clear-cut. But I stand by the words, and it is instructing. The questioning is one instruction method according to
Maturity.
We had the question, do you remember the Lean Summit? We had exactly the same question last week. When you say to people, empty your warehouse and all production is going to be at the cell owns its own production. Try to phrase this as a question and have a result. So it depends where they are in the learning curve of whatever you're trying to do. But at the end of the day, we're talking about CEOs, you know. The shareholders gave them the company. So we are talking about instructing, if only that if your people really believe that the CEO doesn't know what he's doing and is asking questions like this, you'll see the real panic there. I mean, these are real organizations, and they need to understand that you know where you're going, and they need to understand that the questioning is an instruction mechanism, not an open, ooh, tell me where we go next thing. Does that answer the question? I mean,
Super. Right.
yes?
Oh, last one.
Yes, hopefully you instruct, but at the same time you have to develop the people in order to
They find, you instruct, but you develop the people.
Yeah.
They
First you instruct, but afterwards, hopefully, they will ask questions.
How do you develop somebody?
Train,
You instruct.
yeah. You start by training, but afterwards,
Then afterwards, how do you continue to develop somebody?
train by instruction.
So you instruct to the next level. Okay, there's some confusion here about this coaching and instructing and development thing. At the end of the day, you develop somebody because they learn to be autonomous, which are their sort of typical guys.
They are able to change.
I need to think about this for a second. I can see that this is hitting something. Let's take a shop floor example. The point of standardized work is learning to change. When I first heard that, I thought, what? The point of following standardized work is learning to change. But this is not change in a, oh, I'm going to be a different person tomorrow, or it's going to be a different company, or it's going to be different anything. It's change in terms of change tools more often, change products on the line more often, adopt new products more often, change my Kaizen, my work environment, change my very small environment more often, and change takt time, rhythm of working more often. So we're talking about very specific change. So in my world, in which we're trying to coach / instruct very specific things, I don't make that much of a difference between developing and instructing or coaching. The issue is not with the word instructing, coaching, developing. The issue is the specificity of what I'm trying to teach. And most of where everybody gets fuzzy about this is that the coaching we have in mind in the lean world has nothing to do with the coaching you'll hear about in the press. It's actually teaching micro differences on very specific things. It's closer to sports coaching. And sports coaching, all the great sports coaches, they try to find every. Let me conclude by saying your coaching has to adapt to the individual person. It's an individual relationship we have with them. Some people respond well to being yelled at. Some people can't stand it and they shut down and you can't do anything with them, so you have to be very nice. Some people need clear instructions. Some people need to figure it out by joining the dots. It's a completely individual thing. But all the questions are, I don't think you have a problem because I think as humans we're actually quite good at this. The real question for you is, are you specific in the change you want to accomplish? Are you specific enough in the competency you want to bring in? To me, that's a more difficult question. The how you do it, it doesn't matter that much. As long as you're clear on where they are, where you want them to be, is this the right thing, why, and how, as an individual, you're going to get them there. Instructing, coaching, questions, this is all situational. It depends on the person, depends on where they are, depends on their maturity. Actually, depends on their maturity on this narrow task. So we could spend an entire conference just on that topic. But to me, the real problem is the underlying, how clear are we on the specific change in understanding and behavior we're seeking to develop. So how do we break down this notion of developing people into very one-by-one specific changes in understanding and behavior? Does that answer? Thank you very much. You're being great. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you, Michael. Always provocative.
Why do people say that?
Always.
If you only knew what I really have in mind.
Sometimes we do. Right, so 12:15 to 1:45 is lunch. Back in here, 1:45. And please go and enjoy the food in each other's company.
Swinging down the lane, everybody's feeling